Hi, my name is Chad Michael George. I am the soon-to-be treasurer of EatDenver, former president, former vice president. I keep getting demoted, but they keep me around, so must be doing something okay. Super honored to be up here today to present our next speaker, who I've watched from afar as a speaker at one of my favorite annual industry events called Tales of the Cocktail, which takes place in New Orleans in the most pleasant time to be in New Orleans, end of July. So next up we have Louise Green. She's the founder of Healthy Pour. Healthy Pour is an organizational consultancy focused on improving the mental health and well-being of individuals composing the hospitality, food, and drinks sector. Laura, as an organizational consultant and a licensed psychotherapist and former hospitality and drinks professional, she's worked in the hospitality industry more years of her life than she hasn't, which combined with her clinical and academic background has given her a unique and intimate perspective when addressing complex issues in the hospitality industry. Laura came all the way from Chicago to be with us this morning, so let's give her a big round of applause. She's going to talk to us about the case for an emotional industry.
That was so great. I'm going to use this one. Okay, I'll put this one. Cool. Thanks. Hi, it's so nice to hear people say such nice things. Thank you, Chad. My name is Louise Green. I'm a psychotherapist. I'm from Chicago. So if I'm gasping, it's because I can't breathe here. Please forgive me. But, here's my clicker. There it is. That's me. So my background is in hospitality, but I'm also a therapist. And there was a period of time in my life that I was about to leave the industry because I was like, this is unsafe. This is terrible. I'm not going to make it till I'm 40. I am drinking like a wild woman. I was like a wild animal spinning through Chicago. I'm sure you can envision that or maybe even relate. But I wanted to become a therapist. And then by the time I was finishing my degree, I was like, wait, I want to help the industry because now I have all the skills to repair what I was running from. One of those things I think that causes a lot of our trouble is our emotions. And I'm going to be real with you. Our emotions can really screw things up. Our emotions can really mess up our decision-making processes. They can really mess up how we engage with each other, with our relationships. I was talking to a client and he was like, I want to approach this logically. I'm going to take all emotion out of it and just review the data with you. And I'm like, brah, you cannot remove your emotions. You cannot. You can't, even when you stuff them down. Also, I'm really glad to follow Brad because he teed me up. Boop. Love it. But you can stifle your emotions down and stuff them, but that doesn't make them go away. It's like a 2-year-old. If you ignore a 2-year-old, what happens? They just get louder and louder and more annoying and annoying. So when I say emotions can really screw things up, this is only when we don't understand them. Because if we aren't aware of how our emotions are affecting us in our day-to-day, in our decision-making processes, and how we're regarding each other and how we're thinking about ourselves, then it becomes like a wild horse. I had a professor say that our emotions are like a wild horse, that either we can try and cage them and they're going to destroy everything, or we can learn how to ride them and we can work with them and they can enrich our lives and we can go places that we never thought. So a little bit about emotions. They're guides. Exactly what Brad was saying. They're guides to help us understand our needs when we're safe and when we're in danger. And again, they're happening all the time, whether we want them around or not. So when you are experiencing a challenging emotion, that is an indication that there is a need somewhere that is not being met. When we are experiencing pleasant emotions, it's an indication that our needs are being met. So we have this beautiful built-in spidey sense to guide us through our lives. And when we have high energy in our life, so when we're experiencing stress or conflict, we'll feel energy and adrenaline and stuff. That's when let's think of the mood meter. High energy needs are not being met. That's when we experience rage. When we have low energy and our needs are not being met, that's when we experience depression. But when we have low energy and our needs are being met, that's when we are content, happy. When we have high energy and our needs are being met, that's when we're excited. So we can use our emotions to really tell us, Are my needs where is my need not being met right now? So they're guides, it's a tool, and it's an invaluable tool that if we just stuff them down and like leave it, we're leaving a lot of potential on the table. We can only be really logical in our decision-making processes and how we engage with each other if we have a sense of how our emotional life is influencing us. We cannot leave our emotions at the door. We cannot. Like that, I mean, if that's something that you continue to hear in your circles, I would start to shut that down, because there's a lot behind that isn't really helpful, not just for how we work in restaurants, but our well-being overall. So our emotions are the map, but they are not the vehicle. And I want you to think about the difference of when we have emotional dysregulation, or when we are not contained in our emotions, we might have big emotional outbursts. So think about that 2-year-old that's like exploding, or that wild horse that's trying to like break out of its cage. So these big emotional outbursts then become the vehicle of our expression, as opposed to what we're feeling and then communicating. So it becomes very challenging to separate how I'm feeling and how I'm communicating. That's when we see really angry emotional outbursts, or outbursts out of anxiety, or very fearful outbursts. We can feel fear and communicate that fear in ways that the emotion itself is not the vehicle. When we see the emotion become the vehicle, that's when our emotional outburst or communication becomes dangerous and harmful and abusive. Is this making sense? Are you all okay? Sorry, I'm just checking in. I'm like such a therapist sometimes. So emotional labor. In this industry, we see a lot of emotional labor. It's built on emotional labor. Emotional labor is when we are either adjusting our emotional presentation or using our emotions in some way to do a job. So some ways that we might see emotional labor in this industry is if you are working in the dining room and you are engaging with guests all the time. You sort of put on this face, right? Another way is if you are having to conform in some way to the culture of your organization. So you are maybe biting your tongue when you hear someone say something or do something, or you are trying to assimilate to the organization as a whole. Those are emotional laborious processes. And when we think about emotional labor, there's a bit of a spectrum, and I'm gonna call it the alignment spectrum. On one side of emotional labor, we're looking at being totally out of alignment from what we're feeling. And on the other side is when we're directly in alignment. So out of alignment would be total emotional repression, just like stuffing it down. I'm thinking about like that first episode of The Bear, when he's like talking in his ear and you just see him stuffing that down. That is emotional repression. But like if you think about The Bear again, you see those emotions coming out in other ways. They find their way into his life, whether he's in control of them or not. The next one is called surface acting. So this is when like a guest tells a really bad joke and you're like, like I'll have the halibut for the halibut. Like, and then you're like, oh, ha, and then you go in the server station, you're like, shut up, bro, That's surface acting. When it's a very clear mask, you can switch it on, switch it off. When we have surface acting and emotional repression, certainly, those things are tied to burnout. They're tied to being emotionally unwell, depression. That's when we see higher rates of turnover. But the next one is called deep acting. And this is when we really get into the spectrum, because on one side of deep acting, it's when you are changing your emotional life to like think of rainbows and puppies and sunshine so that you feel happy when you are actually not happy. But deep acting can also be implementing compassion in your conversations with people, empathy, something that is changing and manipulating your emotional life so that it's more in line with the needs of the situation or the other of the person that you're speaking to. So on one hand, if we think of like rainbows and puppies and sunshine, or think about a partner, or I'll think about my dog Barley or whatever, and that lifts my mood, that's okay. That helps. It's better than surface acting. But it still it doesn't align us completely, right? If we move more into compassion, then we are changing our emotion, but in alignment with the situation that we're in. In the research, a lot of focus is on surface acting and deep acting, like this versus that, and the preference is deep acting. But what most of the research doesn't talk about is actually like feeling our emotions. Like what a novel thing to think about, to actually interrogate our emotions and to feel them in a moment when we're talking to a guest. If they like say something that's offensive, to have a moment to be like, damn, that was offensive. that kind of hurt, you know? I'm gonna feel that for a second. I'm gonna take a moment and actually feel that and then respond accordingly. So this requires emotional intelligence and coping skills. We put so much stock and stake into how can we put on this face? How can we, smile, you're on stage. Don't show any emotion unless you're crying in the walk-in or any of these things. We put a lot of energy into that when we really should be putting our energy into emotional intelligence and coping skills so that we can feel our emotions in the moment, but we have the tools and the resources to adequately cope with our emotions so that we can respond appropriately and effectively and kindly. So we need our emotions. They need to guide us, because if we don't, and then we're repressing our emotions all the time, that's when we see people ending up at the bar after work until 2 a.m. They missed their yoga class in the morning, or they haven't gone grocery shopping for a week because they are emotionally numbing because they don't know how to manage their emotions. The more emotionally intelligent and the better we are with our coping strategies, the more intensely we are able to feel without our emotions becoming the vehicle of communication. So everyone around us, ourselves included, are much safer within our organizations. But the truth is that authenticity improves our well-being. We know that when we are in alignment, we are less likely to experience burnout, we are more likely to stay at our jobs longer, and this isn't just talking about being authentic with our emotions, but authentic and in alignment with our organization's values and communicating those values and how we feel within the group, how our socio-emotional lives are functioning. Do we feel like we belong? Is our space actually inclusive? Are we careful of each other? Are we thoughtful of each other and thinking of each other and providing the same hospitality to each other that we are providing our guests? But with that, authenticity improves hospitality. Because when we have these authentic exchanges with our guests, oh my God, I just got goosebumps thinking about it. I loved sometimes being a bartender, and those moments were those connective moments with the guest or my colleagues of, gosh, I just crafted this whole experience for you, something that you'll never forget. Through my creation, I just strengthened your relationship with your partner, with your mom, with your friend, whatever. That's extraordinary. And that is the difference between hospitality and service. I can serve a drink and I can mix a mean cocktail for sure. But the hospitality is when we are able to connect authentically, which means we have to have access to our emotions. So an emotional industry is a hospitable industry. And thank you. That's me. Get in touch.